I'm sleeping with your father. If you can't handle it, leave!
She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She looked at her husband and said one sentence that broke 3 generations in a single breath. I'm sleeping with your father. If you can't handle it, leave. But what the husband said 3 years later, when his father lay dying in a hospital bed begging for forgiveness, would haunt everyone who heard it. This is the story of Marcus Thompson, a 40-year-old architect from Atlanta, Georgia, who discovered that the 2 people he trusted most in the world had been betraying him for almost a year. His wife. And his own father. This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's about the moment when everything you believed about family, about loyalty, about blood being thicker than water, reveals itself to be a lie. And it's about the impossible choice between honoring the people who raised you and honoring yourself. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Here's what you need to know. A wife who felt invisible in her marriage. A father who was supposed to protect his son. And a betrayal so deep it didn't just end a marriage, it severed a bloodline. The questions everyone asked were these: how long had it been going on? Did the father plan this, or did weakness lead him there? And when Marcus finally stood in that hospital room 3 years later, would he choose forgiveness or would he say the 5 words that would close the door forever? Comment. I'm watching. If you want to know what those 5 words were, because this story will challenge everything you think you know about family. Stay with me, because what happened to Marcus could happen to anyone, and how he handled it will either inspire you or break your heart. Marcus Thompson grew up believing in 2 things above all else: family is forever, and a man's word is his bond. His father, Leonard Thompson, had raised him with those principles after Marcus's mother died of breast cancer when Marcus was only 12 years old. Leonard was a retired postal worker, a respected man in their Southwest Atlanta community, the kind of father who showed up to every basketball game, who taught Marcus how to change a tire and how to treat women with respect. "Son, you can lose everything in this world," Leonard used to say. "Your money, your house, your job, but family is forever. You protect family no matter what." Marcus carried those words like a compass throughout his entire life. He worked hard, became a successful architect, and at 25, he married his college sweetheart, Vanessa Hart. Vanessa was beautiful, ambitious, climbing the corporate ladder in marketing. For the first few years, their marriage was good. They bought a house in the suburbs, hosted family dinners every Sunday, and Leonard was always there, a constant presence, the father Marcus loved and the father-in-law who seemed to genuinely care about Vanessa. But somewhere around their 8th year of marriage, something shifted. Vanessa became distant, always working late, always traveling, always somewhere else. Marcus tried to talk about it, suggested counseling, but nothing changed. The gap between them grew wider, and neither seemed to know how to bridge it. 2 years before everything fell apart, Leonard's longtime girlfriend Dorothy died suddenly of a heart attack. Leonard was devastated. He had been planning to propose. After Dorothy's death, Leonard started spending more time at Marcus and Vanessa's house because being alone was too painful. Marcus welcomed him, encouraged it even, grateful that Vanessa was kind to his grieving father, sitting with him on the back porch, listening to him talk about his regrets and his loneliness. Marcus thought it was beautiful, the way his wife cared for his father. He had no idea what was actually happening. What Marcus didn't know was that the betrayal had already begun, not physically, not yet, but emotionally. Late-night conversations. Shared secrets. An intimacy that was crossing lines Marcus couldn't see. And soon, very soon, it would become something that could never be undone. On a Tuesday evening in October, Marcus came home from work early. He had finished a client presentation ahead of schedule and thought maybe he'd surprise Vanessa, suggest they go out to dinner, try to reconnect. But when he walked into the house, something felt wrong. Vanessa's car was in the driveway. So was his father's truck. That wasn't unusual, but the energy in the house felt off, like the air was holding its breath. The living room was empty. The kitchen was empty. Then Marcus heard voices coming from the back of the house, from his bedroom. His first thought was that something was wrong, that maybe his father was sick. But as he got closer, he realized the voices weren't distressed. They were quiet, intimate, the kind of tones people use when they're sharing secrets they don't want anyone else to hear. Marcus stood outside the bedroom door, his hand on the doorknob, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He opened the door. Vanessa and Leonard were sitting on the edge of the bed, fully clothed, but close, too close, their knees almost touching. They weren't holding hands, but their body language told a story Marcus's mind was desperately trying not to read. When they looked up and saw him standing there, the expressions on their faces were unmistakable. Guilt. Fear. And something else Marcus couldn't name in that moment but would recognize later as relief, the relief of not having to hide anymore. "What's going on?" Marcus asked, his voice steady even though nothing inside him felt steady. Vanessa and Leonard exchanged a look, one of those silent communications that only happens between people who share secrets. Then Vanessa stood up, smoothed her hair back, and looked at Marcus with an expression that was somehow both defiant and exhausted. "We need to talk," she said. Marcus felt his stomach drop, felt his hands go numb, tasted something metallic in his mouth. "About what?" he managed to say. Leonard stood up too, but he wouldn't meet Marcus's eyes. He looked at the floor, his shoulders hunched, looking older and smaller than Marcus had ever seen him look. Vanessa took a breath, and when she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. "Marcus, I need you to know that this wasn't something we planned. It just happened. And I know you're going to be upset, but I need you to try to understand." "Understand what?" Marcus's voice was getting louder now, his body finally catching up to what his mind was refusing to accept. Vanessa looked him directly in the eyes. No tears. No trembling. Just cold, clear honesty. "I'm sleeping with your father. We've been together for almost a year. And I'm not sorry. I know that's hard to hear, but I'm not going to pretend this is something I regret. Your father makes me feel things you haven't made me feel in years. He sees me. He listens to me. He makes me feel alive." The silence that followed felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Marcus stood there, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to process the words he had just heard. His wife. His father. Together. For a year. A whole year of Sunday dinners where they sat across from him. A whole year of conversations where they looked him in the eye and lied. A whole year of him working late, leaving them alone, trusting them, never imagining that his trust was being used as a weapon against him. He looked at Leonard, waiting for his father to deny it, to say Vanessa was confused or lying or having some kind of breakdown. But Leonard just stood there, still staring at the floor, tears running down his weathered face, saying nothing. The silence was confirmation. The silence was confession. Marcus felt something physical break inside his chest, like a bone snapping, like something vital tearing loose. "Dad?" Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Leonard finally looked up, and his eyes were red and wet, but he still said nothing. What could he say? There were no words in any language that could make this okay. Could you ever look at your parent the same way if they did this to you? Comment never if you'd cut them off forever. Vanessa kept talking, her voice still calm, still rational, as if she was explaining a business decision and not the destruction of everything Marcus had built his life on. "I understand if you need time to process this. I understand if you're angry. But I'm not going to lie to you anymore. I'm not going to sneak around. This is real. What your father and I have is real. And you need to decide how you're going to handle it." She paused, and then she said the words that would echo in Marcus's mind for years to come. "If you can't accept it, then you should leave. If you can't handle it, leave." As if Marcus was the problem. As if he was the one who needed to adjust to this new reality they had created behind his back. As if betrayal was something reasonable people just learned to accommodate. Marcus looked at his wife, this woman he had loved for 15 years, this woman he had imagined growing old with, and he didn't recognize her. The person standing in front of him was a complete stranger. Then he looked at his father, this man who had taught him about honor and integrity and protecting the people you love, this man who had held him when his mother died and promised that they would always have each other, and he didn't recognize him either. The two people he trusted most in the world had become strangers in the time it took to speak a few sentences. Marcus's voice, when it finally came, was quiet but hard as stone. "Get out. Both of you. Get out of my house." Vanessa started to say something, started to reach for him, but Marcus held up his hand. "I said get out. Now." His voice was louder this time, and there was something in it, something raw and dangerous, that made both of them move toward the door. Vanessa grabbed her purse and her phone from the nightstand. Leonard shuffled toward the hallway, still unable to look at his son. At the doorway, Leonard stopped and turned back, his voice breaking. "Son, I don't—" Marcus cut him off, his voice like a blade. "Don't call me that. You don't get to call me that anymore." Leonard's face crumpled like paper, but he nodded and walked out. Vanessa paused at the door too, looking back at Marcus one last time. "I never meant to hurt you," she said softly. Marcus laughed, a harsh, bitter sound he didn't recognize as coming from his own throat. "You're sleeping with my father, Vanessa. What exactly did you think was going to happen?" She didn't have an answer. She just left, pulling the door closed quietly behind her. And Marcus stood alone in his bedroom, in the house he had bought with his wife, staring at the bed where apparently his father had been sleeping with her for a year, and he felt the entire foundation of his world collapse beneath his feet. The smell of Vanessa's perfume still hung in the air. The indent of where they had been sitting was still visible on the bedspread. And Marcus realized that this moment, this exact moment, would be the dividing line of his entire life. Everything before this would be one person. Everything after would be someone completely different. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat on the couch in the living room with all the lights off, replaying every moment of the last 2 years in his mind like a film reel he couldn't stop. Every Sunday dinner where the three of them sat together, and Leonard asked Vanessa to pass the salt. Every time Marcus worked late and came home to find them watching old movies on the couch, sitting just a little too close. Every Christmas, every birthday, every ordinary Tuesday when Marcus left them alone together because why wouldn't he? They were his wife and his father. The two people he trusted most. The two people who were supposed to protect him. How long had they been laughing at him? How many times had they been together in this house, in his bed, while he was at the office designing buildings and thinking about his future? How had he missed it? Or had he seen it, and his mind refused to process it because the alternative was too unthinkable, too impossible, too much like something that happened to other people and not to him? He thought about his mother, buried now for 28 years, and wondered what she would say if she could see this. She had loved Leonard completely, had trusted him the way Marcus trusted him, had believed he was a good man. Would she have seen this coming? Would she have recognized something in her husband that Marcus had missed? The next morning, Marcus called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. He couldn't imagine sitting in meetings and reviewing blueprints and pretending everything was normal when his entire life had exploded overnight. He spent the day making phone calls. First to a lawyer, to start divorce proceedings immediately. Then to a locksmith, to change every lock on the house. He went through the bedroom and boxed up everything that belonged to Vanessa, every piece of clothing, every book, every photo, every reminder that she had ever lived there. He carried the boxes to the garage and stacked them against the wall like he was building a barrier between himself and the past. He took down their wedding photos from the hallway and put them in the trash. He removed her name from the emergency contact list on his phone. By the time Vanessa came by that evening to collect her things, the house looked different, emptier, like she had never existed there at all. She tried to talk to him, tried to explain, tried to make him understand her perspective. Marcus wouldn't engage. He handed her the garage door opener, told her she had 1 hour to get her belongings, and that he would be sitting in his car in the driveway until she was done because he couldn't bear to breathe the same air as her. When she left, she put a note on the kitchen counter, Marcus threw it in the trash without reading it. He didn't want her explanations. Nothing she could say would make any of this acceptable. But the hardest part wasn't Vanessa. The hardest part was his father. Marcus's phone rang constantly for the first 3 days, Leonard calling over and over, leaving voicemails that Marcus deleted without listening to. Leonard came to the house twice. The first time, Marcus didn't answer the door. The second time, Leonard stood on the front porch for almost an hour, knocking every few minutes, calling Marcus's name through the door, his voice breaking as he begged Marcus to just talk, to just listen, to just give him a chance to explain. Marcus sat on the other side of that door, his back against the wood, listening to his father beg, and he felt absolutely nothing. The man he had loved his entire life, the man who had raised him and taught him everything he knew about being a man, that person was gone. The person standing on the porch was a stranger who happened to share his DNA. Have you ever been betrayed by family? Type family if you understand this kind of pain. Marcus's sister Kenya called from Houston after Leonard contacted her in desperation. She was in shock, disgusted, heartbroken for her brother. I can't believe he would do this, Kenya said, her voice thick with tears. Marcus, I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry. I don't want to talk about it, Marcus said flatly. I just need to figure out how to move forward. Have you talked to Dad? Kenya asked carefully. No. And I'm not going to. Marcus, I know you're hurt, and you have every right to be, but he's still your father. Maybe eventually, when some time has passed. No. Marcus cut her off. I don't care what biology says. A father doesn't do this. A father doesn't betray his son like this. He made his choice. Now I'm making mine. What choice is that? Kenya asked quietly. To act like he's dead, Marcus said. Because the father I knew is dead. He died the moment he decided to sleep with my wife. The divorce moved forward quickly. Vanessa didn't contest anything, signed whatever papers were put in front of her, agreed to all of Marcus's terms. She seemed almost eager to get it over with, to move on to whatever life she thought she was building with Leonard. Marcus heard through mutual friends that she and Leonard were living together now, openly, as a couple, as if what they had done was normal and acceptable instead of a betrayal that had destroyed a family. The news made him physically sick. He stopped eating. He lost 15 pounds in a month. His colleagues noticed he looked different, hollow-eyed and distant, but no one asked questions and Marcus was grateful. Within 3 months, the divorce was final. Marcus was single for the first time in 15 years, living alone in a house that felt haunted by ghosts of the life he thought he had. He started seeing a therapist, not because he wanted to but because Kenya threatened to fly to Atlanta and drag him there herself if he didn't go. The therapist, Dr. Wilson, was a calm older man who didn't seem shocked by anything, who didn't offer platitudes or push Marcus toward forgiveness he wasn't ready to give. The hardest part, Marcus told him during one session, is that I lost both of them. Vanessa betraying me, I could have processed that eventually. Marriages end. People fall out of love. But my father, that's different. He was supposed to be the one constant. He was supposed to be the foundation. And he destroyed it. He chose his own desires over his son. How do I come back from that? Dr. Wilson leaned forward slightly. Do you want to come back from that? Do you want a relationship with your father again? Marcus was quiet for a long time. I don't know, he finally admitted. Part of me wants to believe forgiveness is possible, that family is worth fighting for. That's what I was taught. But another part of me thinks some things are unforgivable. And I don't know which part is right. Maybe, Dr. Wilson said gently, it's not about right or wrong. Maybe it's about what you can live with. What serves your healing, not what you're supposed to do according to rules other people made. That conversation changed something in Marcus. For his entire life, he had followed the rules: honor your father, protect your family, forgive those who hurt you. But those rules had been written by people who never faced this situation, who never had to choose between honoring family and honoring themselves. Maybe it was time to write his own rules. But what Marcus didn't know yet was that in 18 months, his father would be lying in a hospital bed, and Marcus would have to make the hardest decision of his life. Do you think Marcus should forgive his father? Comment yes or no right now. Around the 1-year mark after the confession, Marcus started to rebuild. He sold the house because every room held too many ghosts, too much pain embedded in the walls. He bought a loft downtown, smaller but modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows and clean lines, a space that was entirely his with no history attached. He reconnected with old friends, started going to the gym at 5 in the morning, took up woodworking as a hobby because there was something healing about creating beautiful things with his hands after everything had been destroyed. He went on a few dates, nothing serious, but it felt good to remember that the world was bigger than his pain, that possibilities still existed even if he wasn't ready to fully embrace them yet. During this time, Leonard never stopped trying. Birthday cards arrived that Marcus threw away unopened. Christmas gifts showed up that Marcus returned to sender. Messages came through Kenya that Marcus ignored. Leonard showed up at Marcus's new loft once, somehow discovering the address, and stood on the street looking up at the building for over an hour. Marcus saw him from the window, watched his father standing there in the cold, and closed the blinds without going down. He wasn't being cruel. He wasn't trying to punish anyone. He was simply protecting himself, drawing boundaries, choosing his own healing over the comfort of people who had destroyed him. Kenya kept Marcus updated on their father even though he never asked. The relationship between Leonard and Vanessa was falling apart under the weight of what they had done to build it. The community that once respected Leonard now looked at him with disgust and pity. He had lost friends, lost his standing at the church he'd attended for 40 years, lost the respect of everyone who knew what he had done. People crossed the street to avoid talking to him. Vanessa's own family had cut her off completely, her parents refusing to even speak her name. The thing they had destroyed Marcus's life for was crumbling, and they were both drowning in guilt and isolation. Marcus felt no satisfaction hearing this. He didn't want them to suffer. He just wanted to be left alone to rebuild his life in peace. About 18 months after everything fell apart, Marcus got the call from Kenya that he had known would come eventually. Their father had suffered a heart attack. It wasn't immediately life-threatening, but it was serious enough that he was in the hospital under observation. "He's asking for you," Kenya said carefully. "I told him I would call, but I also told him you might not come. Whatever you decide, I support you." Marcus sat with that information for hours, staring at his phone, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. This was the test. This was the moment that would define who he was, what kind of man he had become. He thought about all the times Leonard had been there for him growing up, all the sacrifices his father had made raising 2 children alone after their mother died, all the love that had been real before it was poisoned by this unforgivable act. He thought about what his mother would want, what kind of man she had raised him to be. And then he thought about what he needed, what his healing required, what kind of example he wanted to set for himself about self-respect and boundaries. Marcus made his decision. He would go to the hospital, not because he had forgiven his father, not because blood was thicker than water, but because he needed to see Leonard one more time, needed to say what needed to be said, needed to close this chapter on his own terms. When Marcus walked into that hospital room the next day, Leonard looked smaller than he remembered, older, like the heart attack had taken something essential from him. Or maybe it was just the weight of everything else. Vanessa was there too, sitting in a chair by the window, and when she saw Marcus, she stood up quickly, her eyes wide. "I'll give you two some privacy," she said quietly, moving toward the door. Marcus didn't acknowledge her. He kept his eyes on his father. He would never speak to her again for the rest of his life. Leonard's eyes filled with tears the moment he saw his son standing there. "Marcus," he whispered, his voice weak and broken. "You came. I didn't think you would come. I came to say what I need to say," Marcus replied, his voice steady and cold. "And then I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back." What Marcus said next would become the 5 words that closed the door forever. Leonard nodded slowly, tears already streaming down his weathered face. I'll take whatever you're willing to give me. I know I don't deserve even this much. Marcus pulled a chair close to the hospital bed and sat down. He looked at his father, really looked at him, searching for some remnant of the man he had loved, the man who had taught him how to tie his shoes and ride a bike and be a good person. That man was gone. In his place was this stranger who had made choices Marcus would never understand. I need you to understand something, Marcus began, his voice low and deliberate. I didn't come here to forgive you. I didn't come here because blood is thicker than water or because family is forever or any of the other things you taught me growing up. Those were your words, Dad. Your principles. And you're the one who destroyed them. I came here because I need to let this go, and I can't do that without saying this to your face. Leonard was crying silently now, his whole body shaking with sobs he was trying to hold back. I'm listening, he managed to whisper. Please, son, I'm listening. You taught me everything I know about being a man. Marcus continued, each word measured and final. You taught me about integrity. About honoring your commitments. About protecting the people you love. About what it means to be a father. And then you violated every single one of those principles in the worst way imaginable. You didn't just betray me. You destroyed the foundation of who I thought I was. Because if the man who taught me those values doesn't actually believe in them, then what does that say about me? What does that say about everything I built my life on? I know, Leonard said, his voice breaking. God help me, I know. I think about it every single day. I wake up thinking about it. I go to sleep thinking about it. I wish I could go back. I wish I had been stronger. I wish I had been the man you thought I was. But you weren't, Marcus said simply. And wishing doesn't change what happened. You made a choice. You had 1,000 opportunities to stop, to do the right thing, to remember that I was your son. And every single time you chose yourself. You chose your comfort, your pleasure, your desire over the child you raised. You chose a woman over your own blood. And I need you to know, I need you to truly understand, that there is no coming back from that. Not for us. Not ever. Marcus, please. Leonard started, reaching out with a trembling hand, but Marcus leaned back, out of reach. I'm not done, Marcus said, his voice harder now. I need you to hear all of it. For a long time, I was so angry I couldn't see straight. I wanted you to suffer the way you made me suffer. I wanted you to feel the kind of pain that wakes you up at 3 in the morning and won't let you go back to sleep. I wanted you to understand what it feels like when the people you trust most use that trust to destroy you. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter but somehow more devastating. But I don't feel that anymore. The anger is gone. And what's left is worse, isn't it? I look at you now and I feel nothing. No love. No hate. No connection. You're just a man who used to be my father. And that's all you'll ever be now. The silence in the hospital room was complete except for the steady beep of the heart monitor, and Leonard's ragged breathing. A nurse walked past in the hallway, her footsteps echoing and then fading. Somewhere down the corridor, a television was playing. Normal sounds in a moment that was anything but normal. I understand, Leonard finally said, his voice barely audible. I don't blame you. I don't expect anything from you. I need you to know that I love you. I always have. I know that doesn't matter now. I know it doesn't change anything, but it's true. You're my son and I love you and I am so sorry for what I did. Marcus stood up, preparing to leave. He had said what he came to say, and now it was time to walk away for the last time. I hope you recover from this, Marcus said, looking down at his father one final time. I hope you live a long life. But I won't be part of it. And I need you to stop trying to contact me. Stop calling. Stop writing. Stop sending messages through Kenya. Let me go. It's the only thing you can do for me now. The only thing left that looks anything like love. Leonard nodded, unable to speak, his face wet with tears. Marcus walked toward the door, his hand on the handle, and then he paused. He turned back one more time, and when he spoke, His voice carried the weight of everything that had been broken and everything that had been learned. You know what the worst part is, Dad? The things you taught me about being a man, about integrity and honor and doing what's right even when it's hard, I still believe in those things. Not because you taught them to me, but because they're true. You failed to live up to them. You proved that you were a hypocrite, that your words meant nothing. But that doesn't make the principles less important. It just means you weren't strong enough to follow them. Marcus took a breath, and then he said the 5 words that would close the door forever, the 5 words that Leonard would replay in his mind every day for the rest of his life. You were never my father. The words landed like stones dropping into still water, sending ripples through everything. Leonard made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob, his hand reaching out toward his son one last time. But Marcus was already turning away, already walking through the door, already leaving behind the man who had raised him and taught him and ultimately betrayed him in the most fundamental way possible. Marcus walked through the hospital corridors, past the nurse's station, past the waiting room where Vanessa sat with her head in her hands, past all of it. He stepped out into the cool evening air and felt something shift inside him. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't even closure in the traditional sense. It was release. He had said what he needed to say. He had set the boundary he needed to set. He had chosen himself over the obligation to honor a man who had dishonored him. And now, finally, he could truly move forward. Marcus never saw his father again. Leonard recovered from the heart attack and lived for another 3 years before a second, more severe cardiac event took him in his sleep. Kenya called to tell Marcus when it happened, asked if he wanted to come to the funeral, if he wanted to say goodbye. Marcus declined. He had already said goodbye in that hospital room. He had already done his grieving. The man in the casket was a stranger, and Marcus felt no obligation to perform grief he didn't feel. 3 years after that final hospital conversation, Marcus sat in his downtown loft on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over the Atlanta skyline. He was 45 now, and the man he had become was different from the man he had been, harder in some ways, softer in others, but more authentically himself than he had ever been before. His career had flourished beyond anything he had imagined. He had been promoted to lead architect at his firm and had designed some of the most notable buildings in the city, structures that would outlast him, that would stand as proof that he had created beauty even after experiencing destruction. His work gave him purpose, satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment that didn't depend on anyone else's validation or approval. He had been dating someone for 8 months now, a woman named Lisa who taught 5th grade at a school across town. They had met through mutual friends at a dinner party, and what started as casual conversation had slowly grown into something real. Lisa knew his story, all of it, every painful detail, and she understood why trust didn't come easily to him. She was patient, consistent, proving through her actions and not just her words that not everyone would betray him. Marcus wasn't sure where the relationship would go, wasn't making any promises about the future, but he was learning to be okay with uncertainty, to enjoy what was good without constantly waiting for it to fall apart. Kenya visited from Houston 3 or 4 times a year, and their relationship had deepened through everything they had been through together. She told him that Leonard and Vanessa's relationship had ended badly about a year before Leonard died, the weight of guilt and social isolation finally crushing whatever they thought they had built. Vanessa had moved away from Atlanta entirely, relocated to some small town in North Carolina where no one knew her story, where she could start over. Marcus felt absolutely nothing when he heard this news. Their lives were no longer connected to his in any meaningful way. They were characters in a story that had ended, and he had moved on to a different narrative entirely. Marcus had learned something crucial through this experience, something that contradicted everything he had been taught growing up. Family is not forever just because you share blood. Family is something you build through actions, through respect, through showing up in the ways that matter. And when people violate that, when they shatter the trust that family is supposed to be built on, you have every right to walk away. Forgiveness is not a requirement. Healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes the strongest, bravest, most loving thing you can do is choose yourself, protect yourself, honor yourself, even when everyone else thinks you should sacrifice yourself on the altar of family obligation. Marcus thought about the person he had been before that Tuesday evening when his world fell apart, and he barely recognized that man. That Marcus had been naive, trusting to a fault, secure in beliefs that had never been tested by real betrayal. This Marcus was different. He had been broken and had put himself back together, but the cracks showed and he no longer tried to hide them. The cracks were proof of survival. The cracks were proof of strength. The cracks were proof that he had faced something that should have destroyed him and had chosen to keep living anyway. He had started mentoring younger architects at his firm, sharing not just his technical knowledge but his life wisdom, the hard-earned understanding that came from rebuilding yourself from nothing. He volunteered at a community center that offered support groups for men dealing with family estrangement, and he discovered that his story, as painful as it was, could help others who felt alone in their pain, who thought they were the only ones who had ever experienced this particular brand of family destruction. On the anniversary of his mother's death each year, Marcus visited her grave and talked to her. He told her about his life, about the choices he had made, about the man he had become. He liked to think she would be proud of him, not for the career success or the nice loft or any of the external accomplishments, but for the courage he had shown in walking away from people who hurt him, even when those people were family. "I hope I did right, Mom," he said during his last visit, kneeling by her headstone and tracing her name with his fingers. "I hope you understand why I couldn't forgive him. I hope you know that I still believe in the things you and he taught me. I just learned that believing in principles means holding everyone accountable to them, even the people who taught you those principles in the first place." The wind rustled through the trees, and Marcus felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He had made his choice. He had lived with the consequences. And he had discovered that he could not only survive without the people who betrayed him, he could thrive. So let me ask you this, and I really want you to think about it. What would you have done in Marcus's place? When the two people you trusted most betrayed you in the deepest, most unforgivable way, would you have found the strength to walk away? Do you believe some betrayals are truly unforgivable, or do you think family should be forgiven no matter what they do? Where do you draw the line between honoring your family and honoring yourself? Comment family first if you think Marcus should have forgiven his father, or comment self-respect if you think he made the right choice. I'm genuinely curious what you believe. Marcus's story is a reminder that loyalty is a beautiful thing, but it should never be self-destructive. That forgiveness is a choice, not an obligation, and no one has the right to demand it from you. That some people exit your life not because you're bitter or unforgiving, but because keeping them in your life would require you to betray yourself, to dishonor your own worth, to accept treatment that no one should ever accept. And sometimes, the greatest act of love you can show yourself is setting boundaries that protect your peace, even when the whole world thinks you should sacrifice it for the sake of family. Family is forever, Marcus's father used to say. But Marcus learned that family is only forever when the people in it act like family. When they stop, when they betray you, when they choose themselves over you in the most fundamental ways, you have every right to let them go. Where are you watching from? Have you ever had to make this impossible choice between family and self-respect? What would you say to someone going through what Marcus went through? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because these conversations matter. These stories matter. And your perspective matters. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it reminded you that you have the right to protect yourself even from the people you love, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for watching Western Stories, where we share modern folktales that challenge what we think we know about loyalty, family, and strength. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories that will stay with you long after you finish watching, stories that remind us that sometimes the people who leave make room for the person you were always meant to become. And speaking of stories that will challenge everything you believe, next week we're sharing the story of a woman who discovered her husband had a secret second family with her own sister. You won't believe what she did when she found out. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Until then, remember this, your story isn't over. The betrayals you've faced don't define you. How you respond to them does. I'll see you in the next one.